The help has some nerve, my mother-in-law sneered as she flipped the dining table. For 30 years, this was my life. I was called the orphan girl and slapped daily. My husband had affairs using my money. My father-in-law paraded around my building as if he were the owner. On the day my divorce was finalized, his family threw me out and hosted a party on the 62nd floor. I calmly took out my phone. Mr. Davies, let's begin. That night, the lights in the party hall went out. The true owner of the billion-dollar skyscraper had returned. My in-laws had no idea that I was the secret, legitimate daughter of the founder of Sterling Enterprises. What exactly happened? Before we begin, please subscribe and like this video, and leave a comment telling us where you're listening from, and I'll wish for a wave of happiness to find you there. It was outside the main entrance of the Cook County Courthouse in Chicago. A frigid December wind whipped around the granite steps. At the bottom of those steps, a black Maybach idled silently. The glass doors of the courthouse swung open, and a woman walked out slowly. Evelyn Reed, 52 years old. In her hand, she held the final decree of divorce. 30 years, 3 decades of endurance and patience had ended with this single sheet of paper. Evelyn descended the steps one by one, taking a deep breath. The winter air pierced her lungs cold, but refreshing. It felt as if a blockage that had been lodged in her chest for 30 years was finally beginning to melt away. Just then, her phone vibrated. As she checked the screen, Evelyn's eyes flickered. A single line of text was displayed. Sterling Tower title transfer and deed registration complete. A slow smile spread across Evelyn's lips. It was a billion-dollar building. The only gift left by the biological father who had abandoned her at a group home 52 years ago, a gift he arranged before he died. It was a trust, designed to transfer full ownership to her the moment her divorce became legal. And today, that condition had finally been met. As Evelyn was about to put her phone in her purse, she heard rough footsteps behind her. "Hey, Evelyn." It was her ex-husband, Frank Miller. At 56, he was panting as he ran to block her path. His face flushed and red. He had just heard the judge's ruling in the courtroom. He would not receive a single cent in the property division. "What's so funny you're smiling like that, huh?" Frank sneered, leaning into her face. He reeked of alcohol. He must have been drinking since morning. Evelyn didn't answer. She simply sidestepped him and continued walking. 30 years ago, she would have bowed her head and apologized. But things were different now. There was no longer any reason to. "Where do you think you're going?" Frank shouted from behind her. "You penitent les divorcee. Who do you think you are?" Evelyn's steps faltered for a second. Her shoulders tensed slightly, but she did not turn back. Pressing her lips together firmly, she resumed her stride. The chauffeur of the Maybach quickly opened the rear door. As Evelyn settled into the car, the door closed with a soft thud. She could faintly hear Frank shouting something outside, but inside the car, it was perfectly quiet. The car pulled away. Evelyn gazed out the window and took out her phone. She called her attorney, Mr. Davies. "It's me. I've confirmed the title transfer." Evelyn's voice was low and calm, but laced with a steely resolve. "Change all building access credentials to biometric recognition. And in 10 minutes, I want you to cut all power to the 62nd floor penthouse sky lounge." Hanging up, Evelyn's gaze shifted to the cityscape. A colossal building towered over the Chicago River. The Sterling Tower. She knew exactly what was happening at the top of that building, which was now entirely hers. At that very moment, a lavish party was in full swing at the Sterling Tower's 62nd floor sky lounge. The clinking of champagne glasses, bursts of laughter, and congratulatory remarks filled the air. Her father-in-law, Arthur Miller, navigated through the crowd of guests. The 80-year-old man held a champagne flute, strutting with an air of triumph. Beside him, his wife, Helen Miller, offered a tray of caviar to the guests. At 77, she had dressed for the occasion in a custom designer gown. Arthur took the microphone. The hall quieted. "Everyone, this is a truly joyous day," his voice boomed through the speakers. "We have finally kicked out that orphan girl." Laughter erupted from the guests, followed by a round of applause. Arthur spread his arms wide and declared, "Now, this billion-dollar building is completely mine." It was at that precise moment that every light in the Sky Lounge went out simultaneously. A pitch-black darkness enveloped the entire hall. The emergency alarm began to blare. "What is this? A blackout?" Guests started to panic. Someone screamed, and the sound of a champagne glass shattering on the floor echoed in the dark. Then, the main entrance doors swung open slowly. Backlit by the emergency lights from the hallway, black silhouettes appeared, one by one. 4 security guards entered first, followed by 2 court officers. And finally, Evelyn Reed walked slowly into the room. The emergency lights illuminated her face. Her expression was cold and resolute. The daughter-in-law, who had been called the orphan girl and endured countless insults for 30 years, was now looking at her in-laws with entirely different eyes. Arthur Miller's face froze instantly. The microphone slipped from his hand and fell to the floor. It was that night. After expelling her entire in-law family, Evelyn stood alone on the building's rooftop. The glittering skyline of Chicago spread out beneath her. Her phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. "Hello?" A cold, low male voice came from the other end. "Is this Evelyn Reed?" "This is William Sterling, Jr., Vice Chairman of Sterling Enterprises." Evelyn's hand trembled slightly. William Sterling, Jr., the eldest son of her biological father, William Sterling, Sr., by his legal wife, the man who was her half-brother. "I've seen my father's will." William Jr.'s voice was devoid of emotion. "But our family cannot acknowledge a secret, illegitimate half-sister. From this point forward, you are to have no connection with Sterling Enterprises." The line went dead. Evelyn stood for a long time, holding the phone. The wind from Lake Michigan whipped her hair across her face. She bit her lip. There was the satisfaction of ousting her in-laws, but at the same time, the bitter sting of rejection from her biological family washed over her. The two emotions churned inside her. Evelyn slowly lifted her head and looked at the sky. It was dotted with stars. The baby abandoned at a group home 52 years ago. The young woman who grew up in the foster system for 18 years. The daughter-in-law who was tormented for 30 years as the orphan girl. All those years were finally coming to an end. But Evelyn knew. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. She knew her in-laws were not the type to go down quietly. Evelyn clenched her fists. In the cold city wind, her eyes burned with a fiery determination. The next morning, the 62nd floor Sky Lounge was still littered with the remnants of the previous night's party. Broken champagne glasses, spilled caviar on the floor, overturned chairs. In the middle of it all stood Arthur and Helen Miller. Their faces were swollen, as if they hadn't slept a wink. They had been forced down to the lobby by security guards the night before and had only been allowed back up at dawn. The elevator doors opened. Evelyn walked in slowly, a single document in her hand. The moment Arthur saw her, his face turned beet red. "You insolent brat. What was the meaning of last night?" he roared. But Evelyn didn't even flinch. 30 years ago, she would have been trembling, her head bowed. But not anymore. Evelyn held out the document to her father-in-law. "It's an eviction notice." Arthur snatched the paper from her. His eyes widened. As he read it, his hands began to tremble. His wife, Helen, rushed over to look. The 3 words clearly printed in the owner section caught her eye. Evelyn Reed. Helen's face went pale. "What is this?" Arthur clutched the back of his neck. His legs seemed to give way, and he stumbled, grabbing a nearby chair to keep from falling. Evelyn took a tablet out of her bag. She turned it on, and a spreadsheet filled with numbers appeared on the screen. "You recognize this, don't you?" Evelyn's voice was calm, but it carried the weight of 30 years of resentment. "It's the transaction history for the building's management account. Over the last 10 years, a total of $1.5 million has been withdrawn." Arthur's eyes darted around. His lips were dry. Evelyn swiped the screen. A property deed appeared. A condo in Lincoln Park. Purchased in 2019. The buyer's name is listed as Pamela. At that moment, Helen's expression hardened. "Pamela? Who's Pamela?" Arthur, flustered, couldn't hide his panic. His eyes shifted nervously. She's just a business acquaintance." Evelyn cut him off. "She's the mistress you've been seeing for 20 years. You even bought her a condo with the money you embezzled." Helen's face turned from red to purple in an instant. Her eyes bulged. "What? You've been seeing another woman behind my back for 20 years? So all those late-night business meetings were just you sneaking off to see her?" Arthur shot back. "And where do you think the money you spent came from? All those designer bags you bought on Michigan Avenue?" The couple began screaming at each other. The two people who had united for 30 years to torment their daughter-in-law were now at each other's throats. Evelyn swiped the tablet screen again. A list of corporate credit card charges appeared. "Mother, would you like to see this too?" Helen peered at the screen. Designer boutiques, jewelry stores, 5-star restaurants, tens of thousands of dollars in charges were listed one after another. "You paid for all of this with embezzled money." That makes you an accomplice. Helen's mouth opened and closed. She was speechless. Evelyn nodded to the security guards standing behind her. The four men began to move. They started confiscating the piles of designer handbags, jewelry boxes, and fur coats stacked in a corner of the Sky Lounge. Helen screamed, "No, that's mine." She lunged at the guards but was easily blocked. Evelyn spoke calmly. "You may take the clothes you're wearing and 2 suitcases. Everything else is being seized." Her father-in-law exploded in a fit of rage. "You ungrateful wretch. After I fed and clothed you for 30 years. Evelyn's eyes flashed with cold fire. The words she had held back for 3 decades rose to her lips, but she swallowed them. Instead, she instructed the guards, "Escort them out." The guards dragged the couple towards the elevator. Arthur yelled, and Helen sobbed, but no one stopped. Pushed out a service exit, the couple stood stunned on the street. All they had were 2 suitcases. Helen took out her phone and tried to pay for a taxi. Payment declined. She tried another card. Payment declined. All their cards had been frozen. She rummaged through her wallet. The only cash she had was a single $50 bill. Helen's legs gave out, and she sank to the sidewalk. What do we do? What are we going to do now? Arthur stood silent. In his 80 years, he had never felt so powerless. As evening fell, they didn't even have enough money for a cheap motel. The elderly couple wandered around the building, the cold seeping into their bones. As night deepened, they snuck into the building's underground parking garage. There was an old storage room in the corner. The door was unlocked. Inside, the smell of mold hit them. Discarded cardboard boxes were piled up, and water dripped from the ceiling. Helen collapsed in a corner on the cold floor. Arthur gathered some old boxes and laid them out for her. "We'll sleep here for now." They spent their first night huddled together, back to back. Just yesterday, they had been in the 62nd floor penthouse, proclaiming that the billion-dollar building was theirs. Meanwhile, in a dark alley across the street, someone watched this scene from a distance. It was Michelle Miller, Frank's younger sister and Evelyn's former sister-in-law. 52, just like Evelyn, tears streamed down Michelle's face. For 30 years, she had watched her family torment her sister-in-law, calling her the orphan girl. In her heart, she had always felt sorry, but she never had the courage to stand up to her family. She had just remained silent. That silence was now crushing her. Michelle took out her phone. She found Evelyn's number in her contacts. Her finger hovered over the call button, but she couldn't bring herself to press it. She wasn't brave enough yet. Slipping the phone back into her pocket, Michelle turned and walked back into the darkness. But something was stirring inside her. The knowledge that she had to speak up someday, that she knew a truth that her sister-in-law desperately needed. A few days passed. Life in the storage room was miserable. Every morning, Arthur washed his face with cold water in the public restroom. His reflection in the mirror was unfamiliar. His cheeks were sunken, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. That day, as he stood at the sink, he felt pathetic. A week ago, he was boasting about being the owner of a billion-dollar building. Now, he was living in a basement storage room. Just then, the restroom door opened. A man in his 50s, wearing a crisp suit, walked in. He was a real estate broker known as Mr. Russo. Russo stood at the sink next to him and glanced at Arthur, then did a double-take. "Excuse me, aren't you Arthur Miller?" Arthur turned his head. The face was familiar, a broker he had met during a real estate deal years ago. "Ah, Russo." His voice was weak. Russo looked Arthur up and down. The wrinkled suit, the unkempt hair, the look of a man who hadn't showered in days. He knew instantly something was wrong. "Mr. Miller, is everything all right? You don't look well." Arthur sighed. He had no energy left to keep up appearances. "My daughter-in-law got the best of me. Kicked me out." Russo's eyes lit up with interest. "Your daughter-in-law? You mean with the Sterling Tower?" Arthur nodded. Russo looked around, then lowered his voice. "Mr. Miller, I might have a solution for you. Can we talk for a minute?" The two men left the restroom and walked to an alley behind the building, away from prying eyes. Russo lit a cigarette. Exhaling a plume of smoke, he said, "There's a way to get the building back." Arthur's eyes widened. "A way? What is it?" Russo nodded. "We create a backdated contract." He took another drag. "You know William Sterling, the late founder of Sterling Enterprises? We draft a secret agreement stating that he delegated full management authority of the building to you, his son's father-in-law." Arthur looked at him skeptically. "Is that even possible?" Russo grinned confidently. "I know a guy. He can replicate the handwriting, the corporate seal, everything. He's a professional. Arthur's heart began to race. It felt like a ray of hope. How much will it cost? $100,000. Arthur's face fell. He didn't have a penny to his name. Russo read his expression. You don't have to pay me now. You can pay me when you get the building back. A light returned to Arthur's eyes. He grabbed Russo's hand. Thank you. I can't thank you enough. A few days later, Russo came to the storage room holding a brown envelope. Arthur shot up, his hands trembling as he took the envelope and pulled out the document. Agreement concerning the delegation of management authority for the Sterling Tower. The title itself looked official. He read on. I, William Sterling, do hereby permanently delegate all management authority of the Sterling Tower to my son's father-in-law, Arthur Miller. A smirk formed on Arthur's lips. At the bottom of the document was a signature, William Sterling, and a crisp, red corporate seal. It was so perfectly crafted it was indistinguishable from the real thing. Helen came over to look. Is it real? It's better than real, Arthur said with a satisfied grin. This is the end of that orphan girl. Just then, Frank Miller entered the storage room. His father had called him. Frank took the document and read it carefully. Dad, we can't take this straight to court. Arthur tilted his head. Why not? Frank put the document down. We need to win the court of public opinion first. We pressure her with the media, so we don't even have to go to court. Frank's eyes gleamed. We'll protest in front of the building. We hold up signs, we cry. We tell our story. The live streamers will swarm us. This kind of drama gets millions of views these days. Orphan girl poses as heiress. Evicts her own elderly father-in-law. If we frame it like that, public opinion will explode. Arthur's eyes lit up. His son's plan sounded brilliant. Yes, good. We'll build public support first. Helen nodded in agreement. We need to show the world what a horrible person that orphan girl really is. Sinister smiles spread across their faces. They decided to start their protest the next morning. That night, Arthur lay on the cardboard floor of the storage room, staring at the ceiling. He could hear the drip, drip, drip of water. But a smile was on his lips. Just a little longer. Soon I'll drag that orphan girl down. He clutched the forged contract, believing it was his weapon. He had no idea it was the very poison that would lead to his ruin. Meanwhile, at the same time, in the penthouse of the Sterling Tower, Evelyn was looking out the window. She had just gotten a call from Mr. Davies. We're picking up movement from your father-in-law's side. We have intel that he met with a broker. Evelyn's gaze turned icy. I expected as much. They were never going to go quietly. She hung up and opened a desk drawer. Inside were meticulously organized files, evidence she had been gathering for 30 years. Evelyn muttered to herself, Come on, I'll be waiting. The next morning at 8 a.m., Arthur Miller appeared in front of the Sterling Tower. A large sign hung around his neck. Orphan Hyrus poses as billionaire, Evic's father-in-law. The red letters were bold and clear. Arthur deliberately stood in the most conspicuous spot, right at the main entrance where everyone heading to work would see him. Beside him stood Helen Miller. Her sign read, Betrayed after 30 years of devotion. The two seniors began their performance. Helen was the first to burst into tears. What did we do wrong? We raised her with all our hearts for 30 years. Her voice cracked. Tears streamed down her face. It was impossible to tell if it was acting or genuine emotion. Perhaps it was both. People on their way to work began to slow down, staring with curiosity. Murmurs spread through the crowd. What's going on? He says his daughter-in-law kicked him out. A daughter-in-law like that in this day and age? Arthur raised his voice. Everyone, please listen. My daughter-in-law has thrown us out onto the street. The crowd of onlookers grew. 10 people, then 20, then 30. Soon, a large group had formed. Then, people carrying tripods appeared. They were live streamers and independent journalists. Someone had posted a tip on a local news forum. Father-in-law protesting in front of billion-dollar building. Several streamers aimed their cameras at Arthur. The red recording lights blinked on. A live broadcast had begun. We're live from the front of the Sterling Tower in Chicago, where a man is protesting, claiming he was evicted by his daughter-in-law. A streamer pushed a microphone towards Arthur. Sir, can you tell us what happened? Arthur, as if on cue, began to speak, his voice filled with feigned emotion. My daughter-in-law came from a group home. We took her into our family out of pity. For 30 years, we fed her, clothed her, and raised her. And now, she's thrown us out onto the street. Helen chimed in from the side. That's right. Without us, that woman would be nothing. She's completely ungrateful. The streamer's eyes lit up. This was gold. The views would be astronomical. But whose building is this? Originally, Arthur pulled the document from his coat. The fake contract from Russo. This is the proof. This is a contract where the late William Sterling himself delegated management authority of this building to me. This building is rightfully mine. The camera zoomed in on the document. The live chat on the stream exploded. Wow, is that real? William Sterling? From Sterling Enterprises? How did an orphan get a billion-dollar building? The broadcast went viral. In less than an hour, it was a trending topic. Fake Harris scandal. Orphan's betrayal. Sensational headlines flooded the internet. Online forums were in an uproar. Thousands of comments poured in. How dare an orphan kick out her father-in-law? Daughters-in-law these days are terrifying. But is that contract real? Something seems off. Public opinion was divided. But due to the provocative headlines, the voices condemning Evelyn were louder. It was 10 a.m. Evelyn got out of her car to go to work. She headed towards the main entrance as usual, but the scene was chaotic. A massive crowd was gathered. Camera flashes went off everywhere. Evelyn stopped. What was going on? In that instant, the streamers spotted her. There she is. That's her. They swarmed her. Microphones were shoved in her face. Flashes blinded her. Evelyn squeezed her eyes shut, then opened them. Is it true you kicked out your father-in-law? Is it true you're from a group home? How did you get your hands on this building? Questions rained down on her. Evelyn kept her mouth shut and tried to walk past, but the crowd blocked her way. Just then, Arthur pushed through the throng and stood before her. His face was red. He knew the cameras were rolling. He made his voice tremble to sound as pathetic as possible. Evelyn, my dear, what did I do so wrong to deserve this? His voice cracked, and his eyes welled up with tears. After I raised you for 30 years, is this how you repay me? Evelyn's composure wavered, but she quickly regained her icy calm. She knew this was an act. The man who had called her the orphan girl and tormented her for 30 years was now playing the victim in front of the cameras. Just as Evelyn was about to speak, someone in the crowd yelled, "She's a monster," and something came flying through the air. Splat! An egg. It hit Evelyn squarely on her right shoulder. The yellow yolk ran down her black blazer. The foul smell hit her nostrils. Evelyn froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She had endured all kinds of humiliation for 30 years, but never something so public. The flashes intensified, the cameras capturing her egg-splattered figure. Evelyn knew exactly what would happen when these images hit the internet. Her security guards quickly surrounded her, pushing through the crowd to clear a path. Evelyn held her head high as she walked. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. If she cried here, she would lose. Once inside the lobby, Evelyn stepped into the elevator. As soon as the doors closed, she leaned against the wall. Her legs felt weak. Her heart was pounding. She saw her reflection in the mirrored wall. The egg stain on her shoulder was a stark reminder of the battle ahead. Evelyn wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. That afternoon, the situation worsened. Tenants in the building began to grow anxious. The building owner is a fraud? Are we safe here? If that contract is real, what happens to our leases? A wave of uncertainty spread. The phone rang off the hook. Business partners started cutting ties. Mr. Davies reported to Evelyn, "We've received 3 lease termination notices this afternoon alone." Evelyn's face hardened. She had expected this, but the reality was still suffocating. Is there more? 2 major advertising contracts have been put on hold. They said they'll wait until public opinion settles. Evelyn looked out the window. The streamers were still camped out below, their camera lights twinkling. That night, Evelyn sat alone in her office. A pile of paperwork sat on her desk, but she couldn't bring herself to touch it. Her phone rang. An unknown number. Normally, she wouldn't answer, but for some reason, her hand moved. "Hello." A trembling female voice came from the other end. "Evelyn? It's me, Michelle." Evelyn froze. Michelle? Her ex-husband's sister. They had lived under the same roof for 30 years, but she had never once called her first. "What is it?" Her voice was cold. She was wary. After all, Michelle was one of them. Michelle's voice came again, sounding like she was crying. "Evelyn, I have something I have to tell you. Please, just meet me once." Evelyn didn't answer. She held the phone in silence for a long time. Her mind was racing. For 30 years, Michelle had never said a word to defend her when her family abused her. But she had never joined in, either. She had just been silent. A silence Evelyn had always interpreted as complicity. What is it you want to say? I can't say it over the phone. There's something I need to give you in person. Evelyn's resolve wavered. The phrase something I need to give you stuck with her. Fine. We'll meet tomorrow. Hanging up, Evelyn stared at her phone. A mix of suspicion and anticipation washed over her. What did Michelle want to say? And could it change everything? Outside, the camera lights continued to flash. But as Evelyn watched them, she clenched her fist. It wasn't over. The real fight was just about to begin. The next day, early in the morning, Evelyn headed to the Sterling Enterprises headquarters. She didn't use the main entrance but went through the underground parking garage to avoid being seen. On the third sublevel, there was a restricted area inaccessible to the public. A secret vault. It was a place her biological father, William Sterling, had told only her about before he died. Evelyn stood before the steel door. She placed her palm on the biometric scanner. A green light blinked. After she entered a passcode, the heavy steel door slowly swung open. Inside, a chill air brushed against her face. Fluorescent lights flickered on automatically. In the small room stood a single safe. Evelyn knelt before it and turned the dial. With a soft click, the door opened. Inside were stacks of documents and several USB drives, all neatly organized. The evidence Evelyn had collected over 30 years. Evelyn took out the files one by one. The first was proof of Arthur's embezzlement, a detailed trace of the money siphoned from the management accounts. Every date, amount, and destination was meticulously recorded. The second was a USB drive. It contained security camera footage. Evelyn opened her laptop and plugged it in. The video played. Arthur Miller appeared on screen. It was the scene from a few days ago, with him and Russo forging the signature and pressing the fake corporate seal onto the contract. Arthur's voice was crystal clear. This is the end of that orphan girl. A faint smile touched Evelyn's lips. Her father-in-law had dug his own grave. This video alone was definitive proof of forgery. But the most important piece of evidence was something else. From the deepest part of the safe, Evelyn retrieved a small microcassette recorder. It was an old model, from at least a decade ago. Evelyn's hand trembled slightly. This contained the only recording of her biological father's voice. It was from 2015, when he had secretly come to see her. Evelyn pressed the play button. After a moment of static, a low, raspy male voice filled the room. Evelyn. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. It was her father's voice. The man she had never once called father in her 52 years of life. The man who had abandoned her at birth. But also, the man who had found her in his final years and left her this building. The recording continued. Evelyn, you are my daughter. His voice was trembling, filled with the regret and guilt of an old man. I was wrong. 52 years ago, I've regretted sending you away my entire life. Tears streamed down Evelyn's face. She bit her lip, but it was no use. The tears wouldn't stop. Back then, my wife threatened your mother. She said she'd destroy her if she didn't get rid of the baby. Your mother couldn't bring herself to do it, so she gave birth to you. And I, like a coward, left you at a group home. The voice on the recording was choked with emotion. Forgive me. Please, forgive this father of yours. Evelyn covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. The pain of 52 years without a father erupted all at once. The recording went on. This building is mine. I wanted to give you the most valuable thing I ever built. Evelyn, you are the true heir of the Sterling legacy. Live your life with your head held high. The recording ended. Evelyn remained motionless for a long time, crying alone in the cold vault. She released 52 years of tears in that empty room. After what felt like an eternity, she wiped her eyes and stood up. She looked at her reflection in the polished steel of the safe. Her eyes were swollen, but her gaze was firm. Father, she whispered, I'm going to win. Evelyn packed the evidence into her bag. All that was left was to meet Michelle. At 2 p.m., they met at a quiet cafe overlooking Lake Michigan. Evelyn was already seated at a window table, a cup of coffee in front of her. The cafe door opened, and Michelle Miller walked in. 52, the same age as Evelyn. But today, she looked much older. Her face was gaunt, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. Michelle sat down across from Evelyn. For a moment, they just looked at each other in silence. It's been a while, Evelyn, Michelle began, her voice trembling. It has. Evelyn's reply was measured, her tone still laced with caution. This was the woman who had stood by and done nothing for 30 years. Michelle took a thick manila envelope from her bag. It was bulging with documents. "What's this?" Evelyn asked. Michelle pushed the envelope across the table. "These are the original ledgers of the money my father embezzled." Evelyn's eyes widened. "I've been secretly making copies for the last 5 years." They were hidden in his study. Evelyn opened the envelope. Inside were handwritten ledgers, filled with dates, amounts, and purposes, all in Arthur Miller's handwriting. "Why are you giving this to me now?" Evelyn's voice turned cold. The unspoken question hung in the air. "If you had this, you could have used it so much sooner." Tears streamed down Michelle's face. "I was scared," she choked out. "It meant betraying my family, my father, my brother, turning them in. I was just so scared." Michelle hung her head, tears dripping onto the table. "I saw everything that happened to you for 30 years. When they called you the orphan girl, when they treated you like the help. I never said a word." Michelle's shoulders shook. "You have no idea how ashamed I felt. I'm a coward. I don't deserve your forgiveness." Evelyn watched her silently. A storm of emotions washed over her. For 30 years, she had resented Michelle. Why didn't you say anything? Why did you just watch? But now, seeing her like this, another feeling emerged. The thought that perhaps Michelle was a victim too. How hard must it have been to live in that house, alone with a conscience? To be tormented by guilt every day, yet too afraid to betray her own family. "I'll testify in court if you need me to," Michelle said, looking up, her eyes red and bloodshot. "I'll tell them everything my father and brother did to you. Everything I've seen for the last 30 years. Evelyn slowly put the envelope in her bag. Then, she reached across the table and gently took Michelle's hand. Michelle looked up, surprised. "Thank you." Evelyn's voice was soft. "It's late, but thank you." Fresh tears welled in Michelle's eyes. But this time, they were tears of relief. The weight of 30 years of guilt felt a little lighter. Leaving the cafe, Evelyn immediately called Mr. Davies. "Prepare a press conference." Her voice was firm. "Set up a large screen in the lobby and invite every major news outlet. I want it done by the end of this week. Do you have all the evidence?" His voice came over the line. A smile touched Evelyn's lips. "Yes, I have everything. It's time to end this." Hanging up, Evelyn gazed at the vast expanse of Lake Michigan. The waves rolled in and out. She clenched her fist. The time for her 30-year-long revenge was finally approaching. All the evidence she had gathered, her father's will, and now, Michelle's testimony, all the pieces of the puzzle were in place. The fake contract her father-in-law had created was about to come back and hit him like a boomerang. The family that had tried to destroy her with a media war was now about to be publicly executed by that same media. Evelyn looked up at the sky. A ray of sunlight broke through the clouds. "Are you watching, Father?" The wind blew through her hair, as if in reply. 3 days later, the lobby of the Sterling Tower was unrecognizable. A massive screen was set up in the center, with dozens of chairs arranged in front of it. Reporters began to file in, setting up cameras on tripods and checking their microphones. There were over a dozen cameras from major networks alone. Every significant media outlet in the country was there. A buzz of speculation filled the lobby. "What's the big announcement?" "It's about that orphan heiress, right? I heard the father-in-law produced a real contract." The reporters whispered amongst themselves, the story of Arthur's contract having dominated the news cycle for days. The rumor was that Evelyn was about to offer a rebuttal. In a discreet corner of the lobby stood a man in a baseball cap, his face obscured. No one paid him any mind. But it was William Sterling, Jr., vice chairman of Sterling Enterprises. He had come to watch, unseen. His expression was conflicted. He had seen his father's will days ago and knew Evelyn was his half-sister, but he didn't want to accept it. She was a secret his mother had tried to bury her entire life. Just then, a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. Arthur Miller was walking in, flanked by his wife, Helen, his son, Frank, and the broker, Russo. A triumphant smirk was plastered on Arthur's face. He was certain Evelyn was about to surrender. Why else would she call a press conference? He was sure she would admit the contract was genuine and step down. The four of them sat down brazenly in the front row. "See?" Arthur whispered to Russo. "That little brat is finally giving up." Russo chuckled softly. "What did I tell you? That contract was all we needed." Helen's lips curled into a sneer, as if some orphan girl could ever stand up to us. The time arrived. The lobby fell silent. All eyes turned towards the elevators. The doors dinged open. Evelyn walked out slowly. She wore a tailored black suit, her hair pulled back neatly, her expression calm. Beside her, Mr. Davies followed, carrying a briefcase. 4 members of her legal team followed in a line behind them. Evelyn ascended the podium and stood before the microphone. A barrage of camera flashes erupted. She took a moment to compose herself, then spoke. Today, in this place, I will reveal the truth. Her voice was low and steady, without a trace of a tremor. A few days ago, my former father-in-law presented a document he claimed was a contract from the late William Sterling. Now, I will show you whether that contract is real or fake. Evelyn raised a remote control and pressed a button. A video began to play on the large screen. A dim basement storage room appeared. Arthur Miller and Russo were sitting in front of a document. The on-screen Arthur held up the paper with a satisfied smile. This is the end of that orphan girl. The on-screen Russo pressed a red corporate seal firmly onto the document. It was the moment of the forgery, with the date and time clearly stamped in the corner of the video. A murmur went through the lobby. The reporters began to whisper. That's them forging it. He's stamping the seal himself. It's all on camera. The sound of camera shutters was deafening. In the front row, the color drained from Arthur Miller's face. His jaw hung open. He was speechless. This is. Arthur shot up from his seat, pointing a trembling finger at the screen. It's a fake. That video is doctored. But no one believed him. The video was too clear, and the voice was unmistakably his. Evelyn pressed the remote again. The video paused, and a new screen appeared. This time, it was an audio file. And now, I will let you hear another truth. Evelyn's voice trembled slightly, but she quickly steadied it. The play button was pressed. An old man's voice filled the lobby through the speakers. Evelyn, you are my daughter. The lobby was stunned into silence. Anyone from the Chicago business world recognized that voice. It was William Sterling Sr., the founder of Sterling Enterprises, a legendary figure who had passed away a decade ago. The recording continued. I was wrong. 52 years ago. I've regretted sending you away my entire life. This building is mine. Evelyn, you are the true heir of the Sterling legacy. When the recording ended, a heavy silence hung in the air. No one spoke. Arthur Miller's face had turned ashen. His legs were shaking so badly he collapsed back into his chair. That orphan girl is William Sterling's daughter? It was unbelievable. The daughter-in-law he had tormented for 30 years, calling her an orphan, was the daughter of the founder of Sterling Enterprises. His world was crumbling. In the corner, William Sterling Jr.'s face was a mask of shock. From under the brim of his cap, his eyes were wide. The moment he heard his father's voice, he knew it was all true. Just then, a woman stood up from behind the press section. It was Michelle Miller, holding a thick envelope. She walked towards the podium. Her legs were shaking, but she didn't stop. She stood at the microphone. I would also like to testify. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were determined. Arthur shot up again. Michelle, how could you do this to your own father? He shrieked, his face crimson with rage. Michelle looked directly at her father. She was about to say the words she had held back for 30 years. Father, I can't stay silent anymore. Tears streamed down her face. I saw everything you did to Evelyn for 30 years. You called her the orphan girl. You treated her like the help. You even stole money from her. And I just watched and did nothing. You have no idea how ashamed I am. Michelle held up the envelope. These are the original ledgers of the money you embezzled. I've been secretly making copies for the last 5 years. The reporters erupted. Cameras swung towards Michelle. Arthur's face contorted in rage. You treacherous girl. Selling out your own father, he screamed. But Michelle did not back down. At that moment, the lobby entrance became chaotic again. Everyone turned, for police officers were walking in. They made their way to the front row. One officer stood before Arthur Miller. Arthur Miller, you are under arrest for forgery and embezzlement. A pair of handcuffs clicked shut around Arthur's wrists. The sound echoed through the lobby. What is this? Do you know who I am? Arthur struggled, but it was useless. Another officer approached Russo. Mr. Russo, you are under arrest for aiding in forgery. Russo's face went white. Just days ago, he thought he was about to make a huge score. Now, he was a criminal. An officer approached Helen. Helen Miller, you are under arrest as an accomplice to embezzlement. She screamed. No, I don't know anything. She struggled, but the handcuffs were already on. Finally, a pair was snapped onto Frank's wrists. Frank Miller, you are under arrest for misappropriation of corporate funds. Frank stared at Evelyn in disbelief. Evelyn, how could you do this to me? Do you know who I am? Evelyn didn't answer. She just looked at him with cold, empty eyes. The man who had started cheating on her 2 years into their marriage, who had an illegitimate child. The man who had belittled and mocked her for her entire life. There was nothing left to say. The four of them were led away by the police. Camera flashes followed them relentlessly. Outside, 2 police cars were waiting. Just before being put in the car, Arthur turned and looked back. His eyes met Evelyn's, who was standing at the entrance. Her expression was calm. There was no smile of victory, no thrill of revenge. Just the face of someone who had finally laid down a 30-year burden. The car door slammed shut. They were on their way to the county jail. The remaining reporters swarmed Evelyn with questions. Is it true you're William Sterling's daughter? What is your relationship with Sterling Enterprises? Are you pressing charges against your in-laws? Evelyn returned to the microphone. That is all I have to say for today. The rest will be revealed during the legal proceedings. Evelyn stepped down from the podium and walked across the lobby toward the elevators. Just then, someone blocked her path. It was William Sterling Jr. He had taken off his cap. Their eyes met. William Jr.'s lips trembled as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, no words came out. Evelyn was the first to look away. She stepped into the elevator. Just before the doors closed, she glanced at him one more time. Her gaze held no resentment, no hatred, only a quiet resignation. After 52 years, what was there to say to the family she never had? The elevator doors slid shut. Evelyn leaned against the wall and closed her eyes, letting out a long sigh. It was over. 30 years of a hellish marriage were over, and a new beginning awaited. 2 weeks later, at the Cook County Jail's visitation room, Arthur Miller sat under the harsh fluorescent lights, dressed in a drab prison jumpsuit. His face was transformed. His cheeks were hollow, his eyes sunken. It was a humiliation he had never experienced in his 80 years. He slept on a hard cot in a small cell, was ordered around by guards, and ate 3 cold meals a day. Evelyn sat on the other side of the plexiglass partition. Arthur glared at her, his eyes bloodshot, but he lacked the energy to yell as he used to. 2 weeks in jail had completely broken his spirit. Evelyn spoke first. I'm here to offer a plea agreement. Arthur's eyes widened. A plea agreement? Was she going to forgive him? A flicker of hope ignited, but Evelyn's next words extinguished it completely. On one condition. Her voice was cold and firm. You will repay the $1.5 million you embezzled, plus $500,000 in punitive damages, a total of $2 million. Arthur's face twisted. $2 million? He stammered. He didn't have a cent. All his assets were frozen, his cards blocked. You'll work it off in the building. Evelyn slid a document through the slot under the glass. Calculated at minimum wage, working 8 hours a day. It will take you quite a while. About 50 years, by my math. Arthur's world went dark. 50 years. He was already 80. He would be dead long before he could pay it off. If you refuse, you'll stay here. Forgery and embezzlement. You're looking at a minimum of 5 years in prison. Evelyn's gaze was unwavering. What will it be? Arthur's hands trembled. He clenched and unclenched his fists. Could he accept this humiliation from the daughter-in-law he had dismissed as an orphan for 30 years? But he had no choice. Slowly, Arthur bowed his head. He picked up the pen and signed the agreement, his fingertips shaking. That same day, in another visitation room, Helen Miller signed the same agreement. 2 weeks in jail had completely drained her. Instead of designer gowns, she wore a faded jumpsuit. Instead of luxury cosmetics, she washed her face with a bar of soap. It was a life she had never imagined. Frank made a separate agreement. He would repay the $300,000 he had stolen from the company. He would work elsewhere to pay it off. Evelyn had no desire to see his face every day. A few days later, Arthur and Helen were released. There was no expression on their faces as they walked out of the jail. No joy, no sadness, just an empty void. A car was waiting to take them to the Sterling Tower, but they weren't going to the 62nd floor penthouse. They were taken to the 3rd sub-basement. The elevator doors opened to a dark, damp corridor. A single fluorescent light flickered overhead. The building manager led the way to a small steel door next to the boiler room. This is it. The manager opened the door with a creak. The smell of mold hit them instantly. Helen covered her nose, her face contorted in disgust. They stepped inside. The room was less than 100 square feet. There were no windows. Water dripped from the ceiling, and black mold covered the walls. In the corner stood a single, rusted bunk bed. The mattresses were stained, and the blankets smelled of dust. Helen's legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the lower bunk. "We're supposed to live here?" she whispered, her voice trembling in disbelief. "Just 2 weeks ago, I was drinking champagne on the 62nd floor." Tears streamed down her face. But Arthur had no energy to comfort her. He just leaned against the wall, watching the water drip from the ceiling. The next day at 4 a.m., a loud banging on the steel door woke them. Their bodies ached. The hard bunk had made it impossible to sleep. The door opened, and the manager walked in, holding 2 sets of old work uniforms. "Get up. Time to work." Arthur, still groggy, looked at the clock. It's 4 inches the morning. "Yes. The cleaning needs to be done before the office workers arrive. Get dressed." The manager tossed the uniforms onto the bed, along with mops, buckets, and cleaning supplies. "You have the corridors from the 1st to the 10th floor. Lunch is at noon in the break room." The manager left, and the steel doors slammed shut. Arthur and Helen silently put on the uniforms. They were a dull gray, with no logo. No better than their prison jumpsuits. They went up to the first-floor corridor. The marble floor stretched out endlessly. Arthur filled a bucket with water. He got on his knees and started scrubbing. His knees throbbed. His back felt like it was going to break. In his 80 years, he had never done such work. Blisters formed on his hands. Helen was beside him, panting as she pushed a mop, sweat pouring down her face. "Arthur, I can't do this. I really can't," she sobbed. But Arthur had nothing to say. He felt like he was dying, too. At lunchtime, they went to the break room. 2 pre-packaged meals were waiting for them. Convenience store meals, with expiration dates just a day away. "This is lunch?" Helen stared in disbelief. A week ago, she was eating caviar. Now, it was a meal on the verge of being thrown out. They ate in silence. The cold, hard rice was difficult to swallow. When they returned to their room that evening, their bodies felt like lead. As they collapsed onto the bed, something new caught their eye. A whiteboard had been hung on the wall. In red marker, it read, "DEBT status, $1,998,000 remaining." Seeing the number, Helen became hysterical. "Only $2,000? We worked ourselves to death all day. And that's all? At this rate, we'll never pay it off. Our whole lives?" Arthur snapped back. "This is all your fault. If you hadn't bought all those designer things, we wouldn't be in this mess." Helen's eyes blazed. "What? What about the condo you bought for your mistress for 20 years? With that money, we could have paid this off ages ago." They screamed at each other, their angry voices echoing in the tiny room. The couple, who had been united in their cruelty for 30 years, were now tearing each other apart. As the night wore on, the shouting subsided. They lay in their bunks, their backs to each other. Water still dripped from the ceiling. Arthur lay with his eyes open in the darkness. Just 2 weeks ago, he was the self-proclaimed owner of a billion-dollar building. Now, he was lying in its basement, breathing in the smell of mold. An image of his daughter-in-law's face floated in his mind. For 30 years, he had called her the orphan girl, treated her like the help, belittled and abused her. And all along, she was the daughter of the founder of Sterling Enterprises, a person from a world far above his own. And he had spent 30 years trying to crush her. Arthur gritted his teeth. He was furious, but there was nowhere to direct his anger. It was all because of his own greed. 4 a.m. was approaching. In a few hours, he would have to get up and pick up a mop again. And the next day, and the day after that, until the $1,998,000 was paid off. Arthur stared at the ceiling and muttered, "What kind of life is this?" His voice was swallowed by the darkness. No one answered. Only the sound of dripping water filled the small room. A few days later, Evelyn was in her office reviewing documents. After the press conference, public opinion had completely reversed. The video of the forgery had silenced any sympathy for her in-laws. Now, comments of support for her poured in. The business partners who had terminated their contracts called to apologize. The advertising deals were back on. Everything seemed to be returning to normal. Just then, her phone rang. The screen showed Michelle's name. "Evelyn, something terrible has happened." Michelle's panicked voice came through as soon as she answered. She was out of breath. What is it? It's Kevin. Kevin's in big trouble. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Kevin, the illegitimate son of her ex-husband, Frank, and his mistress. 28 years old. And just like his father, addicted to gambling and scams. What kind of trouble? $5 million. Evelyn. Kevin created fake lease agreements in your name. He collected security deposits from multiple companies and ran off with the money. Evelyn's hand went limp. She almost dropped the phone. 5 million? Yes. And now he's fled to the Bahamas. They said he got on a flight last night. Evelyn's mind went blank. $5 million. A scam committed in her name, without her knowledge. As soon as she hung up, she called Mr. Davies. Kevin's run a scam. $5 million. File a police report immediately. The lawyer's voice grew urgent. The victim companies are going to come after us. How should we handle it? Emphasize that I am also a victim. My name was used without my consent. Evelyn hung up and looked out the window. Just when she thought things were settling down, another storm was brewing. That afternoon, as Evelyn was heading down to the lobby, the elevator doors opened to a scene of chaos. Where's the owner? I want my money. The lobby was in an uproar. Dozens of people had gathered, their faces red with anger, shouting. One man was kicking a desk. Another had thrown a chair. Crash. A glass panel shattered. As Evelyn stepped into the lobby, someone recognized her. There she is. It's her. People swarmed her. Before she could react, a large middle-aged man was in her face. His eyes were bloodshot. He grabbed her by the collar. Give me my $5 million, he roared, spittle flying from his mouth. My company is about to go bankrupt because of you. If I don't get that money, I can't pay my employees. Evelyn's throat tightened. She couldn't breathe. Her security guards rushed forward, but there were too many people. I'm a victim too, Evelyn gasped. A victim? The man scoffed. Don't make me laugh. The contract has your name on it. You're responsible. Evelyn pulled a document from her bag. It was the police report she had just filed. Look at this. I reported it this morning. My name was stolen. The man snatched the paper and read it. His expression changed. Is this real? Yes. I'm a victim too. A man named Kevin used my name to commit fraud. Evelyn caught her breath and continued. You shouldn't be angry with me. We need to work together to catch him. I want to catch him too. I'm furious that he did this using my name. The man's grip loosened. He let go of her collar. The other victims heard her words and began to murmur among themselves. She's a victim too? Identity theft? So the real criminal is someone else? Evelyn addressed the crowd. The police are investigating. They believe Kevin is in the Bahamas. We will catch him. I promise you that. Her gaze was firm. Seeing her determination, the crowd began to calm down. We'll cooperate. Just make sure you catch that bastard, the large man said, his tone completely different. One by one, the victims left the lobby. Evelyn looked at the wreckage. Shattered glass, overturned chairs, scattered papers. Another storm had passed. That evening, as Evelyn was in her office discussing how to handle the crisis, a notification popped up on her phone. A news alert. Sterling Tower $5 million fraud. Owner also a victim. She read the article. Thankfully, it highlighted that she was a victim. But the comments below were still a mess. Negligence? How could the owner not know? Something smells fishy. Evelyn sighed. The blade of public opinion could turn on her again. She might have to fight another battle. Just then, her phone rang again. An unfamiliar number. Hello? A frantic voice came from the other end. Is this Evelyn Reed? This is Mercy Hospital ER. Sister Maria has collapsed. Evelyn's heart stopped. Sister Maria? What happened? Stress-induced cardiomyopathy. We're treating her now. Your number was listed as her emergency contact. Before the caller finished, Evelyn was running. The elevator was too slow, so she took the stairs. As soon as she got in her car, she yelled, Mercy Hospital, as fast as you can. During the drive, her mind raced. Sister Maria, the woman who had raised her at the group home. For 18 years, she had been like a mother to her. Even after leaving, Evelyn visited her every month. She was the only person Evelyn considered family. She arrived at the hospital and ran to the ER. Where is Sister Maria? She asked a nurse. Bed 3. Over there. Evelyn rushed over and pulled back the curtain. Sister Maria was lying on the bed, her face pale. She was wearing an oxygen mask, and an IV line was connected to her arm. Sister. Tears streamed down Evelyn's face. She knelt beside the bed and took the nun's hand. It was cold. Sister, it's me. Evelyn, please, open your eyes. Sister, Maria's eyelids fluttered. She slowly opened her eyes. Evelyn. Her voice was weak, barely audible through the oxygen mask. I saw the news. My poor Evelyn, going through another hard time. Evelyn felt her heart break. Sister Maria had collapsed after seeing the news. The footage of Evelyn being accosted by the victims had been broadcast. Sister, I'm okay. Please don't worry, Evelyn said, squeezing her hand. I'm going to win this. I promise. So you have to get better too. A tear rolled down Sister Maria's cheek. My Evelyn, you've grown so much. You're a strong woman now. She feebly squeezed Evelyn's hand. No matter how hard it gets, don't give up. If you are on the right path, God will help you. Evelyn nodded, her tears unstoppable. Yes, sister, I promise. I will win. Evelyn stayed by her side all night, holding her hand. By dawn, Sister Maria's condition had stabilized. Evelyn stepped out into the hospital corridor and looked out the window. The sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of red and orange. Evelyn wiped her tears with the back of her hand and clenched her fist. Kevin, the name echoed in her mind. The man who had stolen her identity, scammed people out of $5 million, and caused Sister Maria to collapse. Evelyn's eyes grew cold. I will find you, she muttered, her fist tightening. No matter where you run, I will find you and make you pay. The morning sun illuminated her face. Her eyes were swollen from crying all night, but her gaze burned with a fierce fire. A new battle had begun. A week later, at Mr. Davies' law office, 3 laptops sat on the desk, their screens filled with numbers and graphs. Next to the lawyer sat a digital forensics expert, a man in his 30s with glasses, looking like he hadn't slept in days. I've got it, the expert said, pointing at a screen. Evelyn leaned forward. Kevin's access logs for an online gambling site. I traced the IP address. It's pinging from Nassau, in the Bahamas. A map appeared on the screen, a red dot marking a location in the city. Can you be more specific? Evelyn asked. The expert typed on his keyboard. A new window opened. I also tracked his cryptocurrency transactions. He converted some of the stolen money into Bitcoin. The Bitcoin was then cashed out at. The screen zoomed in. A casino hotel in downtown Nassau. We have multiple cash withdrawal records from that location. Evelyn's eyes lit up. They finally had him. Mr. Davies nodded. I'll file a request with Interpol. With the cooperation of the Bahamian police, we should be able to catch him within a week. Evelyn looked out the window. An image of Sister Maria in her hospital bed flashed in her mind. She had promised her, please, proceed as quickly as possible. Evelyn's voice was low and firm. A few days later, in Nassau, Bahamas, vibrant neon signs lit up the night. A massive casino hotel towered over the streets. It was 2 a.m. On the 15th floor, Bahamian police and American federal agents gathered in the hallway, wearing tactical vests. Room 1512. An agent signaled. The officers moved silently to the door. Crash. The door was kicked open. Officers swarmed into the room. Freeze. Police. A voice boomed. The lights flicked on. A figure shot up from the bed. It was Kevin, in his underwear, his eyes wide with shock and confusion. What the hell? He yelled. But before he could react, he was tackled to the ground. Click. Handcuffs were snapped onto his wrists. Kevin Miller, you are under arrest for fraud and forgery. Kevin struggled. Get off me. Do you know who I am? But it was useless. He was dragged out of the room. A search of the room yielded a shocking discovery. Under the bed, they found stacks of cash totaling $2 million. In the closet, they found several gold bars. This should cover about half of the victim's losses, an agent remarked. The other $3 million had already been lost at the casino tables. 2 days later, Kevin was extradited to the United States. Reporters mobbed him at O'Hare International Airport. Camera flashes went off like crazy. Kevin was let out, his head bowed. Just days ago, he had been living a life of luxury in a Nassau casino. Now, he was a shackled prisoner in front of the cameras. Do you have anything to say to your victims? A reporter yelled, shoving a microphone in his face. Kevin said nothing, just gritted his teeth. A month later, at the Cook County Courthouse, the trial began. The courtroom was packed. Evelyn and the other victims sat in the gallery. In the defendant's box sat Kevin, in a prison jumpsuit. Next to him was Russo, the broker. In a separate section sat Arthur, Helen, and Frank. Thanks to Evelyn's plea deal, they were attending trial without being in custody. The judge spoke. The court calls Michelle Miller to the stand. A murmur went through the courtroom. Michelle stood up and walked to the witness stand. Her legs trembled, but she didn't stop. After being sworn in, she sat down. The judge asked, "Witness, are you the daughter of the defendant, Arthur Miller?" "Yes, I am." Michelle's voice quivered. "Please testify as to what your father, brother, and mother did to your former sister-in-law." Michelle took a deep breath. Then she began. "For 30 years, my family abused my sister-in-law." The courtroom fell silent. They called her the orphan girl and insulted her constantly. They treated her like the help. When she was sick, they accused her of faking it. When she cried, they told her she was being dramatic. Tears streamed down Michelle's face. "My father embezzled $1.5 million from the building's management funds. He used that money to buy a condo for his mistress. My mother used it to buy designer goods." From the defendant's section, Arthur shot up. "Michelle, how could you do this to your own father?" He roared, his face red with fury. The judge slammed his gavel. "The defendant will be silent." Arthur was forced back into his seat, his eyes blazing with hatred. Michelle looked directly at her father. Her tears were flowing, but her gaze was steady. "Father, I can't stay silent anymore. I've been silent for 30 years. It's time for the truth." She turned back to the judge. "My brother is no different. He embezzled $300,000 of company funds. He blew it all on gambling and parties. And all the while, he mocked Evelyn, calling her a penniless divorcee." Michelle's testimony continued, revealing 30 years of hidden truths, one by one. The faces of everyone in the courtroom hardened. After all the witnesses had been heard, the judge prepared to deliver the sentence. Defendant Kevin Miller. Kevin looked up, his face pale. "For the charges of fraud and forgery, this court sentences you to 8 years in prison." Kevin's face crumpled. He hung his head. Defendant Russo. Russo flinched. "For the charge of forgery, you are sentenced to 2 years in prison." Russo let out a sigh, a look of relief that his sentence was shorter than Kevin's. Defendants Arthur Miller, Helen Miller, and Frank Miller. The three of them looked at the judge, their faces tense. "While the charges of embezzlement and accomplice to embezzlement have been proven, given the victim's request for leniency and the settlement reached, this court sentences you to probation." A wave of relief washed over them. They wouldn't be going to prison. But it wasn't over, the judge added. "However, as per the terms of your agreement with the victim, the obligation to repay your debt remains in full effect." Arthur's face fell again. $2 million. He would be scrubbing floors in that basement until every last cent was paid. Frank, too, still had to pay back his $300,000. The trial was over. People began to file out of the courtroom. Evelyn stepped out into the hallway and let out a long breath. It was finally over. Just then, someone approached her. She looked up. It was William Sterling Jr., her half-brother. They stood in silence for a moment. He spoke first. "I was there, in the lobby, at the press conference. I saw everything." Evelyn didn't respond, just watched him. "I apologize," William Jr. said, bowing his head slightly. "At first, I didn't want to accept you. It was hard to process having a secret sister." He looked up, his eyes sincere. "But then I saw what those people, your in-laws, did to you. I learned what you endured for 30 years. Our family, we were wrong." Evelyn's expression softened slightly. "What good does that do now?" Her voice was low. "It's been 52 years. I lived 52 years without a family. What changes if you call me family now?" William Jr. was speechless. He knew she was right. After a moment of silence, he spoke again. "Please, attend the next Sterling Enterprises board meeting." Evelyn looked at him. "As family, as my father's daughter." William Jr. extended his hand. "I know it's late, but I want to start over, properly." Evelyn looked at his outstretched hand. This was the moment she had waited for her entire life. But her heart was a mix of emotions. Slowly, she raised her hand and took his. "It's very late, but thank you." Their hands clasped. A ray of sunlight streamed through the courthouse window. A long, dark battle was ending, and a new beginning was on the horizon. 1 year later, against the backdrop of the blue Chicago sky, A massive skyscraper stood tall. A new name was emblazoned on its facade: Reed Tower. The golden letters glittered in the morning sun. It had become a new city landmark. That morning, an event was being held in the building's first-floor auditorium. It was the inauguration ceremony for the Reed Foundation, a new scholarship fund. The hall was filled with staff from local group homes, social workers, and the young people who would be the first recipients of the scholarships. Evelyn stood at the podium. She looked different than she had a year ago. The shadows were gone from her face. Her eyes were still firm, but now they held a warmth. Standing here today, I'm filled with emotion, Evelyn began. I also grew up in the foster system for 18 years. Back then, I couldn't see a future. What could I do? Where could I go? I was anxious every day. The auditorium was silent. Everyone was listening intently. But I didn't give up. I fell down, and I got back up. I lived that way for 52 years. Evelyn's voice trembled, but she steadied it. This foundation is for children growing up in difficult circumstances, just like I did. I want you to know you are not alone. I will be here for you. Thunderous applause erupted, filling the auditorium. In the front row sat an elderly woman in a simple dress. It was Sister Maria. She had fully recovered from her illness and had come to see this day. Tears of joy streamed down her wrinkled face, a proud smile on her lips. After the ceremony, Evelyn went to her. They embraced without a word. "My Evelyn, look how far you've come," Sister Maria whispered, patting her back. "It's all because of you, sister. I never would have made it this far without you." Evelyn's voice was thick with emotion, her eyes red. "Now, it's my turn to pass on that love to other children, just like you did for me." Sister Maria cupped Evelyn's face in her hands. "Yes, that is true happiness. To share the love you have received. My Evelyn understands that now." They both cried, not tears of sadness, but of gratitude and joy. A few days later, Evelyn received a call from Sterling Enterprises. "Have you made a decision about the seat on the board?" It was William Jr. A year ago, he had offered it to her. Evelyn looked out her window at the sunlight sparkling on the Chicago River. "Thank you, but I must decline." There was a short silence on the other end. "May I ask why?" Evelyn smiled. "I don't want to live my life as William Sterling's daughter. I just want to live as Evelyn Reed." Another pause, then a soft chuckle from William Jr. "I understand. I respect your decision, but I would still like for us to be family. Maybe see each other on holidays. I would like that very much." The call ended. Evelyn smiled as she looked out the window. She had found her family after 52 years, but she had no desire to live in their shadow. She had gotten this far on her own strength, and she intended to keep living that way. That afternoon, she met with Michelle at a cafe with a view of the lakefront. "Thanks for inviting me, Evelyn," Michelle said timidly. Even after a year, she was still nervous around her. Evelyn took her hand. "Michelle, you are my family." Michelle's eyes widened. "What? Of all my in-laws, you are the only one I can forgive." "No, not forgive. You were always on my side, weren't you? You were just suffering in silence." Tears welled in Michelle's eyes. "Evelyn, come over to my place more often. For holidays, or just whenever you're bored. It's like I finally have a sister." Michelle broke down sobbing. The guilt that had plagued her for 30 years was finally melting away. Evelyn, her own eyes wet, hugged her. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant hues over the water. At that same moment, in the third sub-basement of the Reed Tower, a very different scene was unfolding. Arthur and Helen Miller were walking down the corridor in their dingy work uniforms, carrying mops and buckets. A year had passed, but nothing had changed. They still woke at 4 a.m., cleaned all day, ate expiring convenience store meals for lunch, and returned to their moldy room at night. The whiteboard on the wall had a new number. Debt status: $1,800,000 remaining. In 1 year, they had paid off just $200,000. At this rate, they had 9 more years of work ahead of them. Arthur was now 81. In 9 years, he would be 90. He might not even be alive. Helen collapsed onto the bunk, her whole body aching. "Arthur, I really can't do this anymore," she moaned. But Arthur had no energy to respond. He just leaned against the wall, panting. A year ago, he had realized this was all his fault. His greed led to the embezzlement. His arrogance led to the forgery. It had all come back to destroy him. But regret was useless now. All that was left was to endure this living hell. Meanwhile, Frank was working at a construction site, hauling bricks and mixing cement. He still had a long way to go to pay back his $300,000. Kevin was in prison, serving his 8-year sentence, staring at the sky through a barred window. Russo was there too, serving his 2 years, a consequence of his own greed. The sun had set. Evelyn went up to the rooftop. The Chicago skyline was a dazzling tapestry of lights. She took a photograph out of her bag. It was a picture of William Sterling Sr., her biological father. She had only seen him in person a few times, but she always carried this photo. "Father," she whispered. The wind rustled her hair. "I've found my name now." The man in the photo seemed to be smiling. "Even though I grew up in foster care, even though I was abused by my in-laws, I never gave up. Now, I'm living proudly under my own name." A tear traced a path down her cheek, but it wasn't a sad one. "Thank you, Father, for leaving me this building. Because of it, I found myself." She heard footsteps. She turned to see Michelle standing there. "Evelyn, I thought I'd find you here." Michelle came and stood beside her. They looked out at the city together. "Are you happy, Evelyn?" Michelle asked softly. Evelyn thought for a moment. Happy? She wasn't sure if that word fit her. "I don't know about happy," she said, her eyes on the skyline. "But I'm at peace. Finally, at peace." The city lights reflected in her eyes. "For 52 years, I lived as someone else. In the group home, I was a number. In my marriage, I was the orphan girl. It's only been a year since I could proudly say my own name." She looked at Michelle. "So if you ask me if I'm happy, I don't know. But I am at peace. I found my name, and that's enough." Michelle nodded, her eyes glistening. The stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Their shadows stretched long across the rooftop. From the top of the building to its deepest basement, light and shadow coexisted. Above, Evelyn was beginning her new life. Below, her former family was paying for their sins. Evelyn looked up at the star-filled sky. "This is the real beginning," she murmured. "My life, in my name. This is my life." Now, the wind blew, and the golden letters of the Reed Tower sign gleamed softly in the starlight. A long darkness had ended, and a new light was just beginning. If today's story resonated with you, even in a small way, I hope you'll visit this channel again. And if you have a moment, please leave a kind word for the protagonist of our story. That kindness might just be what someone needs to get through their tomorrow. I'm wishing you all the best, for today and for all your tomorrows.